Number 1. Shaye Groves. Shaye Groves was a 27-year-old woman from Havant, Hampshire, England. She was in a turbulent relationship with her boyfriend, 25-year-old Frankie Fitzgerald. Their relationship looked exciting, but was full of jealousy and arguments. Both liked true crime stories and had a strange fascination with famous criminals. Shaye even decorated her bedroom walls with framed pictures of serial killers and kept a display of decorative knives. One of those knives became the murder weapon. On July 17, 2022, Frankie fell asleep in Shaye's bedroom. While he slept, Shaye attacked him with a knife, stabbing him more than 22 times. It was a violent and deliberate attack. Frankie died at the scene from his injuries. Instead of calling the police, Shaye tried to clean parts of the room, smoked, and then video called a friend. During that call, she showed her friend Frankie's body and said she had snapped and stabbed him many times. She also sent video clips suggesting Frankie had assaulted her and was violent. The friend reported the call to the police. When officers arrived and began investigating, they found that Shaye's story did not match the evidence. The clips she shared were manipulated or taken out of context. The original versions did not show Frankie hurting her. Phone data and messages also showed that Shaye had been tracking Frankie's movements and was jealous after discovering messages he sent to a teenage girl on social media. Shaye believed the girl was 13, but she was actually 17, and Frankie had already blocked her before the incident. Detectives concluded that Shaye was not acting in self-defense. Instead, they believe she formed a false story after the killing to protect herself. They pointed to her interest in crime, the weapons she kept, and the steps she took after the stabbing, cleaning, staging, and sending misleading media to create a cover story. All of this suggested planning and awareness, not panic. The case went to trial at Winchester Crown Court. Shaye pleaded not guilty and claimed she acted in self-defense after Frankie supposedly assaulted her. The prosecution presented evidence showing premeditation and a deliberate attempt to mislead. They highlighted her fascination with killers, her collection of knives, and her efforts to build a false narrative. The jury believed the prosecution. They found Shaye Groves guilty of murder. On February 22, 2023, the judge sentenced her to life in prison with a minimum term of 23 years before she can apply for parole. During the sentencing, Frankie's family described him as a kind, beautiful person and a young father of 2 whose life was taken far too soon. Shaye showed little emotion as the sentence was read. As of April 2025, Shaye has served around 2 years of her sentence. She remains in a UK prison and will not be considered for parole until she completes the 23-year minimum term. This case is a clear example of a toxic relationship, extreme jealousy, and a failed attempt to claim self-defense. The physical evidence, the digital records, and her own actions after the crime told the true story, leading to her conviction. Number 2. Natalie Bennet. Natalie Bennet was a 47-year-old woman from Croxteth, Liverpool. Her relationship with her 24-year-old boyfriend, Casey Anderson, was filled with tension, arguments, and violence. On the night of March 11, 2023, their relationship reached a deadly point. Neighbors on Carl Lane East heard shouting and loud banging coming from Natalie's home. About an hour later, Casey appeared at a neighbor's door, bleeding badly and barely able to speak. He called emergency services, saying he was dying but couldn't explain what had happened because of how severe his injuries were. During the emergency call, Natalie took the phone from him and told the operator that Casey had come in like that, pretending that he had arrived already hurt. When paramedics and police arrived, they found Casey with deep stab wounds that had damaged vital organs, as well as several other cuts and bruises. He was rushed to Aintree Hospital for surgery, but despite doctors' efforts, he died only a week before his 25th birthday. Natalie was arrested that same night. Investigators quickly noticed things that didn't add up. There was a strong smell of cleaning chemicals inside her home, and several kitchen knives had just been washed and placed in the sink. Ring doorbell footage from a nearby house showed Natalie standing outside with a knife near Casey's head earlier that evening. Clear proof that her story about him arriving injured was false. Prosecutors charged her with murder. During her trial at Liverpool Crown Court, Natalie said she had acted in self-defense, claiming that Casey had attacked her first. But the jury didn't believe her version of events. The evidence proved otherwise. The video footage, the freshly cleaned knives, and her cold behavior after the attack. It also came out that as Casey lay in the street trying to call for help, Natalie called him a little rat instead of helping him. After a 4-hour deliberation, the jury unanimously found her guilty of murder. On November 10, 2023, Judge Dennis Watson KC sentenced her to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 18 years before she can apply for parole. During sentencing, the judge said, "No sentence I can pass can restore Casey's life. His friends and family will always mourn his death. Your actions have caused the waste of a human life." Casey's family described him as kind, funny, and full of life, a young man with his whole future ahead of him. Natalie, however, showed no emotion in court. As she was led away, she turned to her father in the gallery and gave him a thumbs up, showing no regret for what she had done. As of April 2025, Natalie Bennet has served about 1 year and 5 months of her 18-year minimum sentence. She is still in prison and will not be eligible for parole until 2041. Her case stands as another example of domestic violence turned deadly, where jealousy, lies, and a desperate attempt to cover up the truth led to a tragic end. Number 3. Sharon Carr, the Devil's Daughter. Sharon Louise Carr, known as the Devil's Daughter, is one of the most shocking killers in Britain's history, not just because of her crime, but because of how young she was when she committed it. At only 12 years old, she brutally murdered 18-year-old hairdresser Katie Ratcliffe in 1992. Katie had been walking home from a nightclub in Camberley, Surrey, when Sharon spotted her and decided to attack. It was completely random. Katie didn't know Sharon, and there was no reason for the assault. Sharon stabbed her more than 30 times with a knife in a violent and unprovoked frenzy. After the murder, she left Katie's body near a cemetery, where it was found the next morning by 2 boys. At first, police couldn't imagine a young girl being responsible. Because of the brutal nature of the wounds, investigators believed the killer was an adult man. Sharon went unnoticed and continued with her life as if nothing had happened. 2 years later, when Sharon was 14, she attacked another girl at her school, Collingwood College Comprehensive. She stabbed a fellow student in the school toilets without any reason. Witnesses said Sharon was smiling during the attack and looked happy as she stabbed the girl. Luckily, other students ran in and stopped her before she killed again. Police arrested Sharon and sent her to a hospital for assessment. Even there, she showed violent behavior, threatening and trying to harm nurses. Because of her actions, she was moved to a young offenders institution. While in custody, Sharon began bragging about killing Katie Ratcliffe. She told family members during phone calls that she had murdered someone, and she wrote disturbing things in her diary. One of her diary entries read, "If only I could do it to you again. I was born to be a murderer." She also described the wounds she inflicted on Katie in such detail that police realized she knew things only the killer could have known. She even marked the 4th anniversary of the murder by writing, "Respect to Katie Ratcliffe, 4 years ago today." That was the final piece of proof investigators needed. In 1996, police charged Sharon Carr with Katie's murder. In March 1997, when she was 17 years old, she stood trial and was found guilty of murder. The judge called her case extraordinary and deeply disturbing, especially because she was only a child when she killed. She was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 14 years. Even though Sharon became eligible for parole long ago, she has never been released. Prison reports describe her as violent and unpredictable, still showing fantasies about hurting others. Authorities believe she is still dangerous. As of April 2025, Sharon Carr has been in prison for about 28 years. She's now 45 years old and still behind bars. Despite serving double her minimum sentence, she remains locked up because psychiatric evaluations continue to say she poses a high risk to others. Sharon's story remains one of the darkest and most chilling in British crime history, a reminder that evil doesn't always come from adults, and sometimes it starts far earlier than anyone can imagine. Number 4. Bailey Haywood. Bailey Haywood was a 23-year-old woman from Bicester, Oxfordshire, England. Her name became known in March 2024 after she murdered a 45-year-old man named Dale Bond. The case shocked the quiet community because of its suddenness, the brutality of the stabbing, and Bailey's silence about what truly happened that day. On March 13, 2024, around 12:20 p.m., emergency services received a frantic call reporting that a man had been badly injured at a home on Mullen Road in Bicester. When police officers and paramedics arrived, they found Dale Bond lying in his living room with multiple stab wounds. Officers tried to save his life, and paramedics, including specialists from the air ambulance, worked on him immediately. Despite their best efforts, Dale was pronounced dead at the scene. Soon after, investigators identified a nearby address connected to the attack. When police went to the location, they found Bailey Haywood there. She had bloodstains on her clothes and appeared calm but detached. Officers arrested her on suspicion of murder. From that moment, she offered very few explanations about what had happened. A post-mortem confirmed that Dale Bond died from a deep stab wound that caused severe internal damage. Police began to piece together the events leading up to the killing, but there were many unanswered questions. The two had known each other, but their relationship wasn't clear, whether romantic, friendly, or casual. What was clear, however, was that something had gone terribly wrong inside that house. During her trial at Oxford Crown Court, Bailey's defense team claimed that she acted in self-defense, suggesting that Dale had attacked her first, but investigators could not find any sign of that. There were no defensive wounds on Bailey, no damage in the house showing a struggle, and no evidence of Dale being violent toward her. Witness statements and forensic reports supported the idea that Dale was taken by surprise. The court concluded that the evidence simply didn't support Bailey's claim. When prosecutors questioned Bailey, she remained mostly silent. She gave little explanation for why she stabbed him, and she never clearly stated her motive. Detectives said she was the only person who truly knew what happened that day, but she had chosen not to speak. Because of that, the real reason for the killing remains a mystery. After reviewing all the evidence, the jury found Bailey guilty of murder. The judge described the case as a senseless act that destroyed a man's life and devastated his family. On August 2024, she was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 17 years and 181 days before she can apply for parole. As of April 2025, Bailey has served just over 6 months of her sentence. She will not be eligible for parole until December 2041, by which time she will be about 41 years old. The case of Bailey Haywood stands out because of how little is known about why she killed Dale Bond. There was no clear motive, no confession, and no explanation. Only a violent act that ended one life and ruined another. It remains one of those tragic cases where the truth about what really happened inside that home might never be fully told. Number 5. Jemma Mitchell. Jemma Mitchell's case is one of the most disturbing and cold-blooded murders in recent British history. She was a 38-year-old woman from Willesden, northwest London, intelligent, well-educated, and highly skilled in anatomy. But behind her calm, educated image was someone capable of carrying out a gruesome and calculated killing. Jemma studied human sciences at King's College London, where she graduated with first-class honors and even won the Hamilton Prize for her excellence in anatomy. Her understanding of the human body was advanced. She had learned how to dissect with precision. However, despite her qualifications, she was never licensed to practice as an osteopath in the UK. By 2015, she was unemployed and living in a deteriorating £4 million family house with her mother and sister. The family was also struggling financially after being scammed out of about £230,000 by builders during a home renovation. In 2020, Jemma met 67-year-old Mccullogh Chong, known as Debbie, at church. Mccullogh, who had moved from Malaysia to London decades earlier, was a kind, gentle, and mentally fragile woman. Over time, the two became close friends. Mccullogh initially agreed to lend Jemma £200,000 to help repair her home, but later changed her mind and told her to sell her house instead. This angered Jemma deeply, and her greed and resentment began to grow. On June 11, 2021, Jemma visited Mcculloogh's home in Wembley, carrying a large blue suitcase. While there, she murdered Mccullogh Chong, most likely by striking her head and killing her instantly. Then, using her anatomical knowledge, she decapitated the body and placed it into the suitcase. She stole Mcculloogh's personal documents and later forged a fake will that falsely left 95% of Mcculloogh's £700,000 estate to Jemma herself and 5% to her mother. Jemma returned to her home that same day with the suitcase, storing it in her garden shed for nearly 2 weeks. Then, on June 26, 2021, she drove more than 200 miles to Salcombe, Devon, to dispose of the body. Part of Mcculloogh's remains were discovered by walkers the next day. The rest was found nearby a few days later. Before the body was discovered, Jemma told police that her friend had gone away to visit family by the sea. However, CCTV footage later showed Jemma entering Mcculloogh's home with the suitcase and leaving several hours later with it looking noticeably heavier. This footage, along with the forged documents and blood evidence, tied her directly to the crime. Jemma was arrested and charged with murder. Her trial began on October 11, 2022, at the Old Bailey. She pleaded not guilty, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury took only 7 hours to convict her. On October 28, 2022, she was found guilty of murder, and Judge Richard Marks KC described her as extremely devious, dishonest, and utterly without remorse. He sentenced her to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 34 years. Throughout the trial, Jemma remained emotionless. She never admitted guilt or showed sympathy for the victim's family. The prosecution said she murdered Mccullogh purely out of greed, manipulating a vulnerable woman to try to solve her own financial problems. As of April 2025, Jemma Mitchell has served about 2.5 years of her sentence. She remains in a UK prison and will not be eligible for parole until October 2056, when she will be 72 years old. Jemma's case stands as one of the most calculated and chilling examples of premeditated murder in modern Britain, a crime driven by greed, intelligence misused for evil, and a shocking lack of conscience. Number 6. Virginia Mccullogh. Virginia Mccullogh was a 31-year-old woman from Chelmsford, Essex, who shocked the nation when it was revealed that she had brutally murdered both of her parents, John and Lois Mccullogh, inside their own home, then lived with their decomposing bodies for more than 4 years. Virginia lived with her elderly parents, acting as their main caregiver. Both John and Lois were in poor health and relied on her for daily help. But behind closed doors, Virginia was secretly misusing their trust and finances. She had run up massive debts, exceeding £60,000, and had been stealing money from her parents' bank accounts to fund a growing gambling addiction. In June 2019, desperate for money and fearing her fraud would be discovered, Virginia decided to kill her parents. She prepared a cocktail of prescription drugs and mixed them into their drinks. Her 70-year-old father, John, drank the mixture and died quietly in his sleep. Her 71-year-old mother, Lois, however, refused the drink. When Virginia realized Lois was still alive the next morning, she panicked. Fearing her mother would uncover what she had done, Virginia attacked her with a hammer and then stabbed her multiple times with a knife, killing her. After murdering both parents, Virginia calmly began to cover up the crime. She concealed their bodies inside the house, building a makeshift tomb of bricks and wood panels for her father in a downstairs room, and hiding her mother's body inside an upstairs wardrobe. Then she went on with her life as if nothing had happened. Over the next 4 years, Virginia continued to collect her parents' pensions and use their credit cards. She even pretended to be them, calling banks to request new cards and PINs, sometimes disguising her voice as her mother's. When friends or relatives asked about John and Lois, she lied, saying they were ill or away. Meanwhile, she kept gambling online, losing more and more money. For years, no one suspected anything, until September 2023, when concerned relatives and medical workers raised alarms after not seeing John or Lois for a long time. Police visited the Mccullogh home to perform a welfare check. When officers entered, they were met with a horrific sight: the concealed and decomposed bodies of both parents. Virginia was arrested immediately. During her arrest, she told police calmly, "I knew this day would come eventually. Cheer up, at least you've caught the bad guy." When investigators looked into her financial records, they discovered she had stolen more than £150,000 from her parents and spent most of it on online gambling. She also used her parents' identities to apply for loans and credit. Detectives described her crimes as a chilling mix of greed, deceit, and calculated murder. In July 2024, Virginia pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder. The judge called her actions a disgusting betrayal of parental trust and noted the premeditated, greedy nature of her crimes. In October 2024, she was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 36 years before she can apply for parole. As of April 2025, Virginia has served about 6 months of her sentence. She remains in prison and will not be eligible for parole until 2060, when she will be around 72 years old. The story of Virginia Mccullogh stands out not just for its brutality, but for the coldness of her deception, living for years among the bodies of her parents, pretending they were alive, and using their money to feed her gambling addiction. It is one of the most chilling family murder cases the UK has ever seen. Number 7. Lucy Letby. Lucy Letby's name is now infamous in British criminal history. A 33-year-old neonatal nurse from Chester, England, she was convicted of being one of the worst child serial killers in modern UK history, responsible for the deaths of 7 babies and the attempted murders of 6 more while working at the Countess of Chester Hospital. Between June 2015 and June 2016, hospital staff began noticing a disturbing pattern. Healthy newborns in the neonatal unit were suddenly collapsing and dying without clear medical explanation. At first, the deaths seemed random, but soon doctors realized that Lucy Letby was the only nurse present during every incident. The hospital carried out internal reviews, but management was slow to act. Some senior doctors raised their concerns repeatedly, warning that the deaths always occurred when Lucy was on duty. However, their warnings were initially ignored. It wasn't until May 2017 that the hospital finally alerted the Cheshire Constabulary, leading to the launch of a large-scale investigation called Operation Hummingbird. Detectives spent years reviewing medical records, test results, and autopsy reports. What they uncovered was horrifying. Lucy had been injecting air into babies' bloodstreams, poisoning them with insulin, overfeeding them milk, and even physically assaulting them. Her methods were subtle but deadly, often designed to look like natural medical complications. She was first arrested in July 2018, but released on bail. She was rearrested in June 2019 and again in November 2020 as more evidence emerged. In October 2022, her trial began at Manchester Crown Court, one of the longest and most complex trials in UK history. Prosecutors described Lucy as a cold, calculated killer who took advantage of her position of trust to harm the most vulnerable patients, newborn babies. They revealed that she had kept handwritten notes confessing to the crimes, one of which read, "I am evil. I did this." She also showed strange behavior, sending sympathy cards to grieving parents and acting innocent after each baby's death. In August 2023, the jury found Lucy Letby guilty on all counts, 7 murders and 6 attempted murders. The judge sentenced her to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, meaning she will spend the rest of her life in prison. She became one of only a handful of women in the UK to ever receive a whole life order. The court described her crimes as a betrayal of trust and a sustained campaign of cruelty. The families of the victims said that no punishment could ever make up for the loss of their babies, who were supposed to be safe in her care. Even after her conviction, Lucy refused to appear in court to hear her sentence, showing no remorse for her actions. Since then, investigators have continued reviewing other infant deaths and collapses that happened during her time at the hospital, suspecting that she may have harmed even more children than originally proven. As of April 2025, Lucy Letby has served about 1 year and 8 months of her sentence. Because of her whole life order, she will never be released. Her case remains one of the darkest chapters in Britain's medical history, a shocking example of how a trusted caregiver turned into a cold and remorseless killer, targeting the most innocent lives imaginable. Number 8. Karen Vamplew. Karen Vamplew was a 44-year-old woman from Newark, Nottinghamshire, whose shocking crime in December 2021 took the life of her 77-year-old mother-in-law, Elizabeth Ann Vamplew. What made this case particularly disturbing was the reason behind the murder: greed and financial desperation. Elizabeth was a vulnerable, elderly woman who lived alone in a bungalow at Eaton Court, Newark. She had limited mobility and hearing difficulties, which meant she relied on others for help. Karen, her daughter-in-law, was her main caregiver and the person who visited most frequently. Outwardly, it looked like an act of kindness, but behind the scenes, Karen was stealing money from Elizabeth's bank account to pay off her debts. In just a few months, Karen drained Elizabeth's bank account from £27,000 to only £105. The bank noticed suspicious withdrawals and eventually restricted her access, limiting transactions to £5. This enraged Karen as it cut off the money she was stealing. On December 14, 2021, she took Elizabeth to the bank to try to remove the restrictions, but the bank refused. That night, driven by frustration and greed, Karen visited Elizabeth's home twice. CCTV footage showed her arriving in a black hoodie and parking away from the house, suggesting she didn't want to be seen. During that first visit, she set fire to Elizabeth's bed while the elderly woman was asleep. The fire spread quickly, and Elizabeth, unable to move fast due to her age and frailty, died from severe burns and smoke inhalation. After leaving the house, Karen returned a second time, pretending to have just discovered the fire. She then called emergency services, acting shocked and panicked. When firefighters arrived, she told them she had tried to save Elizabeth but was pushed back by the thick smoke. However, the fire investigation team found that the fire had been deliberately started using a naked flame, not caused accidentally by a cigarette as Karen suggested. Initially, police didn't have enough evidence to charge her. Karen was arrested on December 17, 2021, but released due to lack of proof. However, as the investigation continued, forensic experts, CCTV footage, and financial records all built a solid case against her. It became clear that she had murdered Elizabeth to cover up her thefts and prevent exposure of her crimes. Years later, after gathering overwhelming evidence, police rearrested Karen. Her trial took place at Leicester Crown Court, where prosecutors showed that her motive was purely financial gain. They revealed how she had been systematically exploiting Elizabeth, pretending to care for her while secretly draining her savings. The jury found her guilty of murder, and on May 20th, 2024, Karen Vamplew was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 32 years before being eligible for parole. The judge condemned her actions, saying she had committed a heartless and greedy crime against someone who trusted her completely. Elizabeth's family described her as a sweet, gentle woman who deserved care and respect in her final years, not betrayal and death at the hands of someone she loved. As of April 2025, Karen has served about 11 months of her sentence and remains in prison. She will not be eligible for parole until 2056, when she will be nearly 76 years old. The murder of Elizabeth Vamplew stands as a chilling example of greed overpowering humanity, a case where a caregiver turned into a killer, destroying the very life she was supposed to protect. Number 9. Mahek Bukhari and Ansreen Bukhari. This case shocked the UK not only because of its brutality, but also because of who was involved: a popular social media influencer and her mother. Mahek Bukhari, a 24-year-old TikTok star from Leicester, and her 46-year-old mother, Ansreen Bukhari, were both convicted of double murder after a high-speed chase led to the deaths of two young men. It began with a secret affair. Ansreen had been in a relationship with 21-year-old Saqib Hussain, a much younger man. When she decided to end the affair, Saqib reacted badly. He began threatening to expose explicit videos and messages to her husband unless she continued seeing him. Afraid of public humiliation, Ansreen turned to her daughter Mahek for help. Instead of going to the police, Mahek and Ansreen plotted to confront Saqib and take back any compromising material he had. In text messages later used as evidence, Mahek told her mother, "I'll get him jumped by guys, and he won't know what day it is." She also sent a chilling message directly to Saqib saying, "I'm sorry, but this year you'll be gone, Saqib." On the night of February 11, 2022, Saqib and his friend Mohammed Hashimi Jazuddin, both 21, were lured to a Tesco car park in Leicester. They thought they were meeting Mahek and her mother to settle the dispute and collect £3,000 Saqib claimed Ansreen owed him. But it was a trap. Mahek and Ansreen had brought 5 accomplices: Rikan Karwan, 27, Rais Jamal, 23, Natasha Akhtar, 23, Amir Jamal, 28, and Saqib's acquaintance, Sanaf Ghulam Mustaf, 23, to help intimidate Saqib. When the two men arrived, they realized it was an ambush and fled in their car. Mahek and her group chased them in 2 vehicles, reaching speeds of up to 100 miles per hour on the A46 dual carriageway. As the terrified victims called 999, Saqib told the operator, "We're being chased by people in balaclavas trying to kill us." Seconds later, his car was rammed off the road, hit a tree, and burst into flames. Both men died instantly. Instead of stopping to help or calling for help, Mahek and Ansreen sped away from the scene. Another driver saw the burning wreck and alerted authorities. When police began investigating, CCTV footage and mobile phone data placed the Bukharis and their group at the scene. Mahek initially lied to detectives about her whereabouts, but evidence showed she was part of the deadly pursuit. The trial at Leicester Crown Court lasted 3 months. The prosecution said Mahek and Ansreen were driven by anger, humiliation, and revenge. They described how the influencer used her fame and confidence to organize the ambush, while her mother motivated it through fear of exposure. The jury found both women guilty of murder. On August 4, 2023, Mahek Bukhari was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 31 years and 8 months, while her mother, Ansreen, received life with a minimum of 26 years and 9 months. Their accomplices received different sentences based on their involvement. In court, the judge said, "This was a tragic and wicked plan that led to the violent deaths of 2 young men. You acted out of selfishness and deceit, showing no mercy." As of April 2025, Mahek has served about 1 year and 7 months of her sentence. She will not be eligible for parole until 2054, when she will be nearly 54 years old. Once known for her glamorous online persona and thousands of followers, Mahek Bukhari is now remembered as an influencer whose lust for control and revenge destroyed not only 2 innocent lives, but also her own family's future. Number 10. Veronique John. Veronique John was a 50-year-old mother from Stoke-on-Trent, England, whose horrific crime in June 2023 left an entire community speechless. In a shocking act of violence, she murdered her 2 young children and attacked her husband, all within 24 hours of being released from police custody. Veronique was originally from Jamaica and had lived in the UK for years with her husband, Nathan John, and their 2 children, Ethan, aged 11, and Elizabeth, aged 7. Neighbors described the family as quiet, but said there had been ongoing problems between Veronique and Nathan. Their marriage had become toxic and unstable, filled with constant arguments and jealousy. On June 9, 2023, Veronique assaulted Nathan with a piece of wood after accusing him of having an affair. Police arrested her, but released her the next day with a community resolution notice, meaning the matter was treated as minor. Just hours after being freed, Veronique's mental state spiraled out of control. On the morning of June 10, 2023, she took a knife and brutally attacked her children at their home on Flack Street, Stoke-on-Trent. Ethan was stabbed more than 20 times, and Elizabeth also suffered severe wounds. Both children died at the scene before emergency services could save them. After killing her children, Veronique drove to the car wash where her husband Nathan worked on Campbell Road. When she saw him, she attacked again, stabbing him repeatedly. Despite serious injuries, Nathan survived and was rushed to hospital. Afterward, Veronique returned home and called the police herself. In her chilling 999 call, she said, "I've murdered my children." When officers arrived, she calmly told them, "If you have a gun, shoot me. I'm not a monster." He was going to take them from me. Investigators soon uncovered disturbing details about her mental state. In the days before the killings, she had searched online. Can a foreigner be charged with murder in the UK? She later told detectives she killed her children because she believed their father wanted to take them away from her. She said, "I did it because I love my children, to protect them." Her comments revealed a deeply distorted sense of reality. Psychological assessments later found that Veronique was suffering from complex post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and other severe mental health problems. Because of this, doctors concluded she was unfit to stand trial in the normal way. Instead, a trial of facts, a special legal process for mentally unfit defendants, was held at Nottingham Crown Court in July 2024. The jury decided that Veronique had indeed carried out the acts that killed her children and injured her husband, though she did not face a standard criminal conviction due to her mental illness. The court imposed an indefinite hospital order under the Mental Health Act, meaning she would be detained in a high-security psychiatric facility for as long as she remains a danger to herself or others. She was transferred to Rampton High Security Hospital in Nottinghamshire, one of the UK's most secure mental health institutions. As of April 2025, Veronique has served around 9 months of this hospital order. She will remain under medical care indefinitely, possibly for the rest of her life, depending on evaluations of her mental condition and risk level. Her case is one of the most tragic examples of family annihilation in recent years, a combination of marital conflict, untreated mental illness, and sudden violence that led to the senseless deaths of 2 innocent children.